Welcome to the Education Innovators Podcast. I'm Eric Byron, and it is my privilege to host this show where I get to talk to folks from all over the world who are education thought leaders and innovators. We'll hear inspiring stories from educators, EdTech founders, AI experts, and others who are fearlessly innovating and delivering unique learning experiences. I'm glad you're here. Let's get started.
Yeah, I think the other thing I'm hoping that we'll see, which is probably not as much as a hope and a wish, like the virtual reality, is more of a shift to micro learning for training with teachers instead of these, 3-hour sessions we used to go to, integrating it more into the day, making it more part of your day, that ongoing learning component. And that's really something I'm recommending to boards and education institutions when I visit them for consulting.
Annette Levesque is an educator, an author, a consultant, and a podcaster. She's also an expert in online and virtual education, and we're going to tackle this topic in depth in this episode. We're going to cover K through 12 and adult online learning best practices and future trends. So get ready to take notes. Here we go. Welcome to the Education Innovators Podcast. I'm Eric Byron, and today I have with me Annette Levesque, and she is the founder and CEO of the Global Education Station, a platform dedicated to providing modern resources and professional learning workshops for educators, helping them stay ahead of today's technological advancements. She's also the host of the video podcast, The Global Education Station Presents. Annette is an award-winning author. Her book, Elearning Gold, The Ultimate Guide for Leaders, offers insights into building successful e-learning programs. With a master's degree in distance education, she has a proven track record of developing innovative virtual education systems. In 2002, quite a while ago, Annette founded one of the
Yes.
world's first fully virtual accredited private high schools, followed by the launch of a second global virtual school in 2005, which went on to become one of the largest online international high schools in Ontario, Canada. So welcome to the show, Annette. I'm so glad to have you on.
Hi, Eric. Thank you so much. That was an awesome introduction. I think I'd like to just borrow you and take you with me. That was great. Thank you. I hope I can live up to it.
Oh yeah, no. This is going to be great. And so for full disclosure to my audience too, right? So this is a kind of a collaboration. I was a guest on Annette's show, the Global Education Station Presents, and now she's joining me on my show. And so I'm really excited about this because I love the fact that we both are passionate about, education and enhancing education and enhancing or advancing learning experiences. And so we've had between us a whole bunch of different guests talking, experts on various aspects of education with some great stories. So we've had lots of stuff to kind of share. And, I know you've got some great stories that you're going to be able to share with our audience today. So there you go. This is kind of a back and forth, two of us podcasters who talk about education, talking to each other this time. So let's jump in. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. This is going to be fun. All right. So one of the first things that I really liked about this, and it kind of comes out in your profile there, your bio, is that you're a risk taker. You jumped in back in 2002 and really wanted to run with this idea of a virtual school. I want to get a little bit of the backstory. So what problems were you trying to solve?
Well, as you know, innovation, it really does come from problem solving. That's the first thing that jumped into my mind when you said that. And I think just by nature, if you look at personality profiles, I'm a builder. I love to create new solutions, and I have difficulty staying in a box when the box isn't working. And as we know in education, there are a lot of those boxes, Eric. So way back in 2002, when I was teaching, and just really had an affinity for technology, I think, at that time, which wasn't difficult. If you could do an email attachment, you were the new tech rep for your school in 2002. And there were a lot of students who just didn't fit into the mold. They either needed more time for their studies, they needed an alternative way to learn. And I was lucky enough to have the experience of doing an online course myself as a teacher. It was brand new. It was a beta project at Western University. And I was in the course, and all the bells and whistles were going off. I was just thinking, why do we not have this for high school students that are away because they're sick, or they need to make up a course that's not offered in the classroom, or they're living in a remote community, which, as you know, Canada has a lot of those up north, where maybe they don't have access to advanced chemistry or advanced physics because there's not enough students taking it sometimes, and it's just not geographically close to them. They might be in a small rural school that just doesn't have enough students to launch every course available in the curriculum. And it's really interesting because in Canada and specifically Ontario, the actual curriculum it's offered and provided by the government, the Ministry of Education. And there's a breadth of courses that are available to students, Eric, but in the smaller schools, they just can't offer them all. They have to fill a classroom with 30 students within their own school. So often you won't see things like advanced organizational behavior or marketing or some of the fun things. It tends to be a very pure curriculum, math, science, the compulsory subjects to graduate. And so back in 2002, I thought, what if we could bring students together from multiple schools in an online environment and not use e-learning to replace traditional classroom learning, but use it to supplement it? So the program redesigned, the students would do 3 in-class courses, and then they would have 1 e-section. And so you could assign 1 teacher to that room, and each student studying in their online course could be in a different course. The teacher would be the sort of the mentor and collaborator, and then while they were studying the course online, they also had at our school a subject specialist teacher that was accredited and could grant the credit if it was marketing, psychology, business, whatever you wanted to take. And so I began that with the public system, but as you know, often with governments, they weren't quite ready for it yet. So they would launch it and cancel it and launch it and cancel it. And then I don't know, that light bulb went off, and I thought, I wonder if I could get this accredited to offer it privately in Ontario. And it hadn't really been done at that point. We had 1 virtual school, but they had been converted from the public system. And I only had 4 online courses, the 4 ones I had built for the public system. And I don't know what possessed me to do it, Eric, but when I built them at the time, they couldn't afford to pay me to do it, but I really wanted to do it. So I said, okay, I'll build these, but I want to maintain copyright to my work. And they granted that. And I don't know, it just evolved into this little school, 4 courses online, and then it blew up.
Well, great ideas do that, right? Yes. So, well, you had a clear problem. People needed these classes. And so I remember, and I don't remember what year it started, but the Florida virtual school, if you've
Mhm.
heard of that example. And so that was actually kind of an interesting one for me. My kids were, or my son at least, I think was in high school when the Florida virtual school was really just starting to get some steam there. But it also turned out that a lady I had worked with previously ended up being the technical implementer, if you will, the CIO or CTO, whatever you want to call her at the time, of the Florida virtual school. And then she went on to become the global CTO of education for Microsoft. So, and she was on the show
Wow.
too. Yeah, yeah, talked a bit about that. So this concept is really, really solid. I absolutely agree. It solves a problem, but there's challenges beyond that, right? Because now you get into that kind of that next layer of how do you make online e-learning work? The pedagogy is a little different now, and the students are accustomed to classroom. Obviously, this really hit the fan COVID when students and teachers didn't know how to adapt to the online environment. But you've been doing this for over 20 years. So what's the magic sauce there?
Well, my favorite model for successful virtual learning is really that hybrid and blended learning model. So when we launched, it was a local program originally. And in our own data, we very quickly saw that having a support system for students, especially if they were 18 or under the age of 18, was really important to, even though they may have the academic skills, we separate learning skills from academic skills here. They may not yet have matured the self-discipline skills required to log in every day and to consistently work at their course and consistently connect with their teachers. And actually, teachers had some of these issues as well. The teachers needed the self-discipline to be providing immediate feedback and consistently in the program. And so there were a lot of challenges with that when we first launched. And we learned that by having, I called them student success coordinators we assigned to the schools that would not help the students with the academic content, but help them make a calendar of when they wanted to complete their assignments, meet with them every week, help them get through any roadblocks they might be having, whether it be technical, which originally in the local school we had that, but as we expanded into a second school internationally, we expanded the idea of the student success coordinator as well to help them with any cultural differences. You know, we would offer Canadian, Ontario created courses that you think would be able, you could just expand them out everywhere, like school in a box, if you remember that.
Yep.
And we would find out that some of our science lessons, for instance, if they involved environmental science and grass and soil, we had communities that were concrete for, 25 kilometers. They didn't know what grass was, the kids. And so things you just really don't think of. We dealt with censorship internationally. We had one course where we used the video Simon Birch in it for English. And there's a moment where two students chastely share a kiss in it, and it was banned. It was a banned book in some areas of Asia. So we had a lot of those issues to look at. But the secret sauce, I think, is that hybrid model, making sure there's a support network and making sure there's a way for students to connect. Students and adults as well, when we learn or work completely in isolation without a community that's doing the same thing that we're doing, we have a much greater attrition rate. And it's true for workplace learning, it's true for working from home and workplace learning, and it's so true in e-learning. And when there's no connection and there's no support, especially the younger the student, the older the student, the more motivated they tend to have a goal. They want to get into university. They're not going to get in if they don't finish this missing credit they're taking online. Right. Or you're an adult and you're completing, an HR program to attain another certification so you have a better job and get paid more. We have more motivation at that level. So the younger the student, the more support that's required. Otherwise, you see very, very, very high attrition rates in these courses.
Interesting. So just as a kind of a sidebar thing, so also around 20 years ago, I did an online master's. And you're right about the motivation thing. I needed the master's because I was teaching and they said I couldn't continue teaching unless I got the master's. So I was doing online courses. So I would take a class, then I would teach a class, and I would take a class, and I would teach a class. But that disconnected thing, right? I got through this entire master's. I never knew another student. Never had the same students in any class I took because, of course, I was randomly taking these classes just trying to get the credits I needed to graduate and get the degree. But even the faculty, there was no relationship at all with the faculty in the program. Never had the same professor twice. Just, no connection at all. So I almost felt robbed when I was done. I felt like, I didn't make any friends. I don't have any connections. I didn't ever do we did projects, I guess, but because it was a few weeks, you collaborated on something, but you didn't really know these people or talk to them. In fact, the class was completely offline. So there was never a time when we were all online together. So anyway, but that was 20 years ago. And yes, the early experience of doing online education. So I feel, well, the work that you did is impressive because back then we really didn't have a very good understanding of how to do this well. And I got my degree and I did learn some things, but it was all pretty much self-taught. Point me at the material and
That's
I had to learn
amazing.
it. Yeah. Yeah.
takes a lot of self-discipline to go through an entire program that you've just described
Yeah.
in complete isolation. And adult learning is really interesting. If you speak to adults often after they complete an online course, adults, when we look at designing adult learning, adults don't want to mess around. We're busy, they've got families, jobs, careers, and in our mindset, we think we just want to get through it. We just want to log in on our own, plow through it, get it
Yeah.
done. And when you ask them what's the thing they most disliked, often in an online course, they'll say the group work. It's interesting. And they'll say the group work. It depends on the group, I guess, that they were stuck with. But most often it's the group work because the group work requires them to organize synchronized live meeting schedules,
Yeah.
nowadays, and even then so much. Although when we started, we didn't have tools like Zoom and Teams and all of the online meeting software we have
Yeah.
now. So we were using Skype to have teachers' office hours live, but it was very different than today. But adults will say the group work, especially if they have, so you and I are in completely different time zones, and we've had to adapt to that to find, I think we had like a 2 hour window that we could both
Yes.
comfortably be online. So they have to adapt to that in their schedule. And they may or may not have a great technical partner in their group work. So you have varying levels of technical skills in communicating and managing the technology. So they'll say the group work. When you ask them when they finish, what's the thing they most liked about the course? They might say what they learned or their content, but usually right up there will either be the connection with the instructor that they made, but usually it's a connection with another peer in the group that
Mm.
came from the group work and those
Yeah.
interactions. I'm so sorry you didn't have that in your master's degree, but in my master's, I connected with some professional people. We worked through the program that are lifelong friends now in
Yeah.
leaving it. And that's what I remember. I don't remember necessarily the individual assignment we did, but I remember the connections and the things that we worked on together. So it's the
Yeah.
greatest challenge, but the greatest reward in adult online learning.
Yeah. Speaking of that, you draw a distinction actually in your book regarding the designing virtual online courses for children or students versus adults. So is there really a significant difference in today's world? I mean, maybe 20 years ago, but what about in today's world, the way adults learn versus the way children learn? So kind of pedagogy versus andragogy. Is there really a difference today?
There is, for sure, in the way that we design it. As I said earlier, adults don't want to mess around. So adults don't tend to like a lot of fluff in their courses to get to the point. We want to get to the point quickly in the materials. We don't like busy work, right? And in the K to 12 learning environment, the pace is a lot slower at bringing students to their end goal, their end outcomes, and their end objectives. And also, the way the content is presented is obviously very, very different. E-learning to be successful must be relevant and it must be relatable to the student population you're serving, whether it be an adult professional or a student in Malaysia or a student in up north in Canada. And so the way we design that content, there needs to be relatable work skills. Students need to know, what am I going to get out of this? What objectives do I want to achieve? And actually, the one thing that's often not done, we tend to think one size fits all with e-learning, and we design cookie cutter courses and try to offer them across. But even when it comes to culture, it's really important for teachers, even if they're starting with a cookie cutter course that they're going to modify. So, typically today it may have been built by somebody else. Not all teachers are building their own courses anymore, depending on whether you're in public or private. But I suggest that they do a student survey to find out, who are your students? What do they know already? Why are they taking your course? What outcomes are they seeking? I know this is very obvious to people in the corporate and the business world, but in K to 12, you're assigned that classroom and they tend to just start the course, but without gathering all of this data and information to make sure the course is going to be relevant to your learners. And what's relevant to an adult and what's relevant to a K to 12 student is completely different.
Yeah. What about this concept of well, assessment, right? So kids are generally motivated not by the learning, but by the grade. They just need to get through the course and get a grade. Whereas an adult, right, would typically, they're there for a purpose, right? I need to know this for some practical application of it. How much does that affect the design?
Well, I think whether you're a student or an adult, we're all built with dopamine and reward based, right? You've got some experience in gamification, so
Yeah.
you know this. So it's just the type of rewards that we need might change. I think connection, so there's intrinsic and extrinsic rewards for learning. Connection, is more of an intrinsic reward. And I think both adults and students, when we connect with people and we've had a great experience, and everybody has a hard time getting started. So if you've had a reason to log in, maybe you're meeting with somebody, it gets you in the groove and you keep going. That's fantastic and
Yep.
rewarding, and it will keep us participating in the course. And extrinsic rewards would change depending on the adult or the student. And I think we're going to see the design of courses with AI now changing a lot. So as you said, it used to be we were taking the course to get the mark. But if you can have fun learning and really be engaged and enjoy what you're doing in your classroom with your peers, I think that's another form of reward and another reason to be completing the course than just that end goal of the mark. I mean, we all want the good mark. Nobody wants
Right.
to get a bad mark, whether you're an adult or a student. Of course, that's rewarding. And you and I had talked a little bit previously about competency-based learning, and I would love to see education. It's going to be so slow. I don't know if K to 12 will ever get there, but move towards that model of where are you? Where do you need to go? What do you want to learn, whether it's K to 12 or adults? And let's teach you what you need to learn. Let's forego this whole idea that you need to do 110 hours in a classroom or an online course. We can't even track that accurately in an online course, but it's still the legal requirement to earn a course credit versus what are the objectives that a student should have learned or attained at the end of the course? And if they're starting and they already know 25% of the objectives, why are we making them repeat that? Or they're going to get bored and not be
Yep.
engaged to meet those 110 hours. And if they need a little more time, maybe they need 135 hours of learning to get to those objectives. Let's give them 135 hours and let them proceed, along the course. So I think those are some big changes we're going to be seeing in that reward base
Yeah, no,
learning
this is good.
or the rewards
And yes,
receiving.
we did talk about this, not directly in the context of virtual or online courses, but in general, right? Having that flexibility to be able to say we all learn at a different pace. Some need more time, some need less time, and let's allow the correct amount of time per student rather than time box their learning and force you all to do it at the same pace. Yeah, no, it's an interesting point, which also brings me to another question I had written down, prepared for today, and that is the impact of AI and AI tutors now on virtual schooling and online courses. So what do you see going on there, and how much does it really change the pedagogy even for children or adults?
Well, AI has a huge impact on learning. And, in this past year, when I've been working with school boards and visiting universities and colleges, and I've seen such a breadth and a wide range of where people are at, where schools and learning centers are at when it comes to AI. There's some that are sort of innovators, early adopters leading the pack, and they're diving into Magic School and Brisk and all of these wonderful tools. And there's others, specifically when I was in the UK last year, it was very interesting that have a more conservative approach to it, that they're not quite sure. They think a lot of the schools think maybe it's a fad and it's going to pass and they'll use a little bit. But the way we've always done things are very conservative. When I go into the US, it's like, let's break things and blow it up. Let's dive into everything and, try to launch all online schools. And when I say online, I mean with all online teachers and maybe one administrator. And I know you did a podcast on a school that's
Yes.
forward thinking in that. In Canada, we tend to be a little bit balanced. You've got the early adopters, and then you have other schools that are trailing behind. I think one thing that's going to be really important in this, as we're all embarking on this journey, is to really be aware of the possible gap between availability for schools based on budgets. ChatGPT and a lot of other AI tools are they're leveling the playing field and being very accessible when it comes to cost. but deeper things like virtual reality and other forms of learning for training, which I think is going to be emerging more in the next couple of years, are still largely unavailable to smaller schools because of the cost associated with it.
Mm. Yeah, no, that's interesting. So trying to think where I want to go with this because I don't want to get down the whole rabbit hole necessarily of AI and education. Although it's such a big thing for all of us, anybody who's talking about innovation, everybody wants to talk about AI. But well, let's talk more generally. So, so you do a podcast, you get to talk to a bunch of folks from all over the place. What are some of the things you've seen that are really innovative? Things that are not just incremental enhancements, but kind of radical new approach. Have you seen some good examples?
You see a lot more. If I take, let's say, corporate online training, let's move over to there a little bit with organizations. We're seeing a lot more adoption of online learning and the use of AI tools for both soft skills and the concrete skills we need to learn for professional learning. So things like conducting a job interview, getting a lot more self practice and a lot more instant feedback and reflective feedback from the AI. So before, we would log in online for corporate training, especially if you had different locations at a distance. But it again, the cost wise, it was a very difficult thing to set up for smaller organizations. And now there's greater availability of tools for that. We see AI, I think in schools, probably the biggest change is the self reflective feedback. We don't see it in peer feedback necessarily yet, people connecting with the AI in the communities, unless the teacher themselves is very comfortable with it and setting up those communities with things like Magic School, and they're using, those custom bots to run their
Right.
classrooms.
But they're not really changing the model, right? They're just using AI to more efficiently do what they already do in most of those cases, right? I mean, like Magic School. Magic School isn't changing the pedagogy, it's simply making things more efficient in theory. And we've seen that argued back and forth too, whether they're really helping or they're just making us more efficient at doing something the way we shouldn't be doing it to begin with. So yeah, that's a whole nother debate we could have. But what about stuff like, well, like I did a show on the Alpha School, which is I think is what you were referring to earlier, and their like 2 hour condensed AI tutoring period, and the they don't call their teachers teachers, they call them guides or whatever, right? And so there's some very interesting stuff there. Of course, there's the Montessori system, which kind of breaks down that whole thing of the time box, right? And they just say, oh, the kids learn at their own pace, and when they level up, they level up. And and I love that. Of course, that's also true in games. And I love this in the online space too. And you were kind of referring to it earlier, kind of freeing up the timeline and saying, so I think these tools, the AI tutors and stuff, give us a bit of an advantage there in the data that they can collect. So you say, and you can kind of gamify it a little bit, but the AI can know when you're ready. It's constantly doing assessment and challenging you. And when you've demonstrated a certain level of proficiency or competency, right? Competency based system, it then it kind of graduates you, right? You level up to the next the next thing, and you do that at your own pace. So I think there's some wonderful potential innovations there. So what else do you see coming? What's changing out there? All right, let's take a quick commercial break so I can plug the human intelligence movement. I do this on every episode, and I remind you that it is not a paid advertisement. It's just my way of showing support for an organization I believe in. The mission of the human intelligence movement is to ensure that students have the skills to thrive and succeed in an AI world. Please join the movement. I've got a link in the show notes. Show them some love. They're doing great work. All right, back to my conversation with Annette Levesque. So we're going to hear her answer my question now about changes in education and specifically in online education. Let's keep going. Great stuff ahead. So what else do you see coming? What's changing out there?
I think that we're going to really have to look hard at the way we train and provide training to teachers. Ultimately, whether or not people are leveling up in the classroom for students, it's going to be dependent on their teachers and the leaders of their school. And typically, in all education systems, leaders are really advanced in their career path. So they haven't necessarily been playing with smartphones, in their teenage years. And even in our early days with virtual learning, our school inspectors often would come in and they had no idea how to inspect a virtual school and they didn't want to know, Eric. It was very intimidating. And when you're coming in as an inspector and you're supposed to they know how to do check the files and check the hardcore databases, but they can feel very intimidated by so much technology, and that can, in some areas, really stop the advancement and progress of technology. And after COVID, that was one of the things actually I attempted to tackle with my book. What I wanted, and it's the same principle actually with AI, what I wanted to let leaders know was you don't need to know how to build an AI bot. You don't need to fully understand how the technology works. What you need to know is what are the right questions to ask about that technology? What are some of the privacy considerations when we're adopting technology? Where is my data being stored? What goals are we going to meet with it when you're talking to your teachers and your team? Guidelines for that. And we need to be able to provide training for our teachers as well, because I don't know how it is in where you are, but here teachers have very little time for training. And what they know about AI right now is often just very reflective on whether or not they're an early adapter or innovator themselves in using it, or whether or not the school has brought in tools, access to tools like Magic School, and found a way to provide training that's not overwhelming, that there's not pushback on it. Because
Right.
I don't have any more time in my day. I have 90 students, I have these many periods, I have all these things to mark. No, I don't want to go home at night and have to have all these new technologies added, to my program. So I think we really need to, in order to ensure that equilibrium between training models and learning across schools, across provinces, across states, we really need to make sure we're finding innovative ways now and new ways to provide training to teachers that doesn't involve creating an extra job for them.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great point because we all see this and hear it day in and day out that one of the problems with this rapid advancement and continuous evolution of these tools is that teachers are just overwhelmed and administrators are overwhelmed as well, trying to figure out policies and right how to roll this stuff out and make sure it's ethical and kids aren't just using the AI to cheat. And then you've got, yes, teachers who are winging it because they're not getting the PD that they need. And so they're kind of coming up with their own thing. But then say you get into the security and data privacy issues where the teachers found a way, but they weren't asking those questions, right? So
Yep.
yes, yeah, exactly. So it's been kind of a catch 22, I think, for a lot of schools, exactly for that reason that they don't have the time. It is an interesting study to look at some of the difference in Asia. So you have examples here like Singapore, which is pretty much the gold standard for education globally. I guess Finland maybe is right up there too, but certainly in Asia, Singapore is doing it right. And one of the things I've talked about there and we see is I call it the community effect. So as a community, as a society, they have prioritized education and valued teachers as a profession. And so they're paid well, they have time, they have training, it's smaller classes, people volunteer. I mean, tutors and the elderly, retired teachers, everybody comes together as a community to help these schools and the students be successful. And that makes a huge difference. I can't speak to Canada. I can say in the US, this is not the case. Most of these teachers are, feel like they're fighting a battle against the community in many cases, trying to get funding, trying to get support. And the teachers are, being attacked by parents and yelled at, and, all these conflicting, priorities coming at them. So it makes it really, really hard to do their job effectively. So, but we're here to talk about solutions, right? And
Mhm.
how we make things better. And so you've been at this a long time now. How much have you seen the ability to implement change? Are we getting better at this?
No.
Okay, that's the reality of it. Okay, we're not getting better. How come we're not getting better?
Well, I think inherently, in public systems specifically, you do have private institutions that private systems can move much more quickly if they have the budget behind them to do so. So in the private system, you can do what I did and think of an
Yeah,
idea. And once you get it accredited and launch it, you think of another idea and you don't have a board and then another board and then to go through
yeah,
to get that idea approved. In school boards, they're so large and they work very much like a bureaucracy. And I remember building my first online course for the Merrick, and I knew exactly what tools I needed to build it, from HTML editing software and all of those lovely things, but I could only choose from tools and software packages that were pre-approved and licensed by the school board. So they
yeah,
wanted me to build online courses using Word 97. Like, it's not going to work. So ultimately I ended up setting my own system. And again, that's why I kept the copyright to my courses and installing all of the things that I needed. But the approval process is very long. We do see, like, there was one school board actually in Ottawa, Canada, that I consulted with last year. And they have a very innovative director and leader, and he sees the value of technology and sees the value of that instituting ongoing learning. They've instituted lunch and learns and all of these lovely things to try to incorporate learning into a teacher's day. So it's not an extra add-on of, several
yeah,
hours without time to practice it. And that they're ahead of everyone, in the area. They're really ahead of the pack in their learning. But ultimately, even sometimes when you have a leader that's got a great idea and they want to launch it, there's so many hoops to jump through.
mm,
And teachers, you have teachers who are gung-ho, young ones at a university that are still going to change the world, which is awesome. I might
yeah,
still be that person. I don't know, Eric, but I haven't lost my zest.
yeah,
But they have a brilliant idea and they present it, and they're just instantly faced with all of these bureaucratic roadblocks and stops. And I think a really great example, yeah, I'm going to give it anyway because it was 20 years ago. They can't get me for it, Eric. But, you know, school board, they had an innovative director again. They wanted to try out online learning and launch an online learning pilot course. They managed to get their board to approve $50,000 a year to license Blackboard, and they'd done nothing in it. They couldn't get the training department to approve releasing a teacher for 1 or 2 sessions a day to go and train other teachers to use this software, this platform, the LMS.
yeah,
So they ultimately, after the first year, had 8 teachers using it, Eric.
yeah,
Disastrous, right? So that's a really great example of trying to institute change.
yeah. So actually, that reminded me of another thing that I noted as I was looking through your book, and I apologize, I didn't get to read the whole thing. I skimmed through it a bit, but the you have a whole section in there on the importance of LMS and how you know, choose and integrate an LMS into online. So why is LMS, Learning Management System? I think we all know that, but anyway, I don't like to just throw out acronyms. So why is that so important in online in particular?
Well, it's super important because you want to make sure, first of all, there's a huge variety of different platforms you can use to offer your online learning in. And there are varying levels of cost. And so typically the higher cost platforms, which was where, well, we started in that, but they gave you the ability to rent just classrooms at that point and that time before, buying into the whole system. Everything's done for you. So you don't need to know a lot about e-learning getting started, but once you're into the platform and building courses in the platform, it owns you. So you really want to look at what are your costs now and as you grow and long term down the road. And in those types of platforms, you also can't change very much. So you can change design features, you can, all of the option it provides you, but if there's something custom you want to do, it's very limited in that regard. You have updates and all of those lovely things that go on, but you're kind of bound to it.
Mm.
And so if you're starting out, and they all say, Eric, and I put this in my book, that, oh, yes, if you want to change later, you can export everything and re-import it to your new system, and it's going to be no problem. In 20 years, that has never happened. Not one
Yeah.
time, Eric. Every
Yes.
time somebody wants to change their system, you better have a team ready for a week or two to be testing and ironing out the bugs and files. And it's just not, it's like making Microsoft and Apple talk and different. Like there's
Yeah.
just some things that just don't sync, right?
Yeah.
So there's those systems. And then at the opposite end of the spectrum, you have open source type systems, which I really love now. Some people will trend towards them because they feel like they're free, they're going to be lower cost, but you need to have tech support on an ongoing basis. You can customize and do fabulous things, but your budget, instead of going to the big, learning management or learning system company, is going to go into a person or people to do the updates, to manage those systems.
Yeah.
So it's really important to do a needs assessment. And that's typically what I would do with school boards way back when. Before COVID, we had a lot of them, Eric, that still didn't have a learning management system.
Yeah.
Almost everybody is, dabbling in it or using some type of system, whether it be just for a course or to launch their whole offer different courses in their program. But now the issue post COVID is they're not sure what to do with them. They're not sure if they're working. Some of them are still at that, 20 years back. They launched because they had to, and now they've invested in it. But, as we move forward, it's really important to do that needs assessment and figure out what are our goals? What do we need it to do for us? I equate it to sort of going cell phone shopping. There can be 2,000 features, but what are the top 10 that you really need it to be able to do?
Yeah.
And where do you think you're going to take it in the next 5 years or so?
Yeah. No, it's an interesting topic all the way around too, because like you go to any education conference, right, where they have an exhibit floor, and half the booths are selling an LMS, right? There is so many of them, and they all say they're the best, and oh, we do this and we do that nobody else does, but they all say the same thing. So it's very confusing. I think this is also one of the problems you get with these vendors is they feel like they have to keep updating and offering you new features, and really all they're doing is bloating the software into complexity you don't need and can't manage. So simple is always better, I think.
Simple is better. And I think having a little bit of a toolbox going in, because again, comparing it to, as you said, there's just a wealth of features and you just can't possibly anticipate all the things that you may need or anticipate the things that are going to happen down the road. So that's why I created this toolbox in my book. And I'm sure you could hugely build on it again now, because when I launched my book, it was rated as AI. ChatGPT was just coming out that
Yeah.
year. And a lot of people asked me, they said, why didn't you talk more about AI in your book? Because it was only a year and a half ago I launched my book, Eric. And
Yeah.
I was like, because it wasn't, the process of writing and launching a book. I said AI was just starting. It wasn't,
Yeah.
where
Yep.
we are now. But the toolbox still applies. And it's, how many users are you going to have? Who else have they worked with? Where's your data being stored? How does assessment and evaluation happen? Like there's a list of questions. And literally I had one that you could go through that could be up to 4 pages long of just different questions. You can submit it to them, and scanning it as a leader, there's things that make sense and things that won't make sense.
Right.
Here, it's not just individual schools looking for their learning management system. Often you have a school director who may have never been in an online course, who may not have an affinity for technology, responsible for approving the final purchase of a system that's going to affect hundreds of schools in his
Yeah.
board.
Yeah.
And it needs to be able to grow within that system. I also know that there's an inherent disconnect sometimes between technology people. So you have the owners making all those promises in the LMS system and educators. And, educators, we know what we need to do. And unless that LMS system has collaborated with educators in the area they're offering, they don't know what are the limitations to assessment and evaluation. Assessment and evaluation looks completely different across school board, states, provinces, the way you do it in the US and the way you do it in Canada, the point
Yeah.
system versus a percentage grade versus, so what's it going to generate? So you just need to know which questions to ask them, and then you can start to form a picture as to, and how long have they been around?
Yeah.
In the early days, even with websites, we used to purchase available promised e-commerce packages for websites that was a very custom system. We can do all these wonderful things. Well, what if it goes away? What happens to your content then? And what do updates look like if it's a very custom system?
Right. Right.
The updates you get for Moodle as an open source system that's been around a long time and has a huge learning community,
Yeah.
everybody's working together on patch, are very different than one that may have just launched a year ago. That's completely custom. So
Yeah.
these are questions that you don't need to know much about technology that you can ask that will help you start to form a picture of green light, red light in your
Yeah.
your acquisition decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's yeah. There's so many challenges to technology and rolling it out. And of course, now, probably one of the top questions you have to ask is how well does it integrate AI, right? So these
Mm-hmm.
AI tutors have the ability to collect a massive amount of data. It's not
Mm-hmm.
just the, you know, summative assessment at the end, a quiz or whatever, and a score, right? It's constantly assessing and looking at how long did you spend on this? How many tries did you make? Are you clearly guessing? You just, we say in gaming, button mashing.
Mm-hmm.
AI can tell that you're doing that, and it can gather a lot of data and insights into not just that you got to the right answer, but how you got to the right answer and how confident you are. But you got to be able to integrate that into your LMS in some way to be able to report on it and flag, stuff and say confidence level, not only pass fail or, say a percentage point score. So those things are much trickier. And I think those become important questions for your LMS too. How well can it deal with that influx of data?
Mm-hmm. I'm a big fan of compartmentalizing tools, specialty tools, and combining them with the LMS so you're not a hostage to anything. It takes a very long time. So if we use Moodle again as an example, you can build a lot of things into it and there's integrations. But to build something from scratch that's not already there or create programming and integration, that's a lot of work. And anything custom you do, when an update comes out, it overwrites all your stuff and you have to reapply all that custom code again. And so we used to find starting out, and this is my personal preference and opinion in working with schools, but we'd find that some of the chat rooms and some of the LMS systems were not very user friendly or effective. I had some where there's a lovely chat room where teachers could communicate with students, but there was no notification available if they were doing an evening class or offering office hours that someone had entered the room. So you would sit there and
Oh,
stare at your screen in case someone's going to enter. But then Zoom came out and it's designed for one purpose, right? Online collaboration and
yeah.
communication. And so we would do things like have links in the course that would open into these separate specialty tools.
Mm,
When it comes to virtual experiments and things like that, and with AI, there's companies doing magical things where students can have these experiences.
hmm.
So full integration is not always required. And that's another great question to ask of the LMS. Like I used to have all teachers and web designers work with the teachers, create the lessons in HTML, but they were never built in the HTML offered in the platform. So what we would do is we had our own server. Basically, I tell people who don't love technology, it's like a filing cabinet where all your files are in. You can store them in the company's filing cabinet, you can have your own. And we would create a link that actually opened in Moodle. So it looked like the lesson was opening in Moodle, but it was actually opening in Moodle window and a link that was pointing to my filing cabinet. So if I decided to change the learning management system that I wanted to use and there were problems, all I had to do was repoint the link to my files were always intact in the building
Right.
because it takes so much time. So it's really great to be able to shift and pick the tool that does the best job when new things come out. But once you integrate too much and you build in it, you're stuck because you put all this work and all
Yeah.
this money. Don't reinvent the wheel. That's my
Yes. Yes. Good.
if you don't
Good
have
point.
to.
Yeah. So where are we going from here? What do you see on the horizon? The next 3 years? What's going to change?
Well, I think we're going to see more of an adoption, of course, of AI by teachers. Everything takes some time and as the tools become more friendly and easier for them to use. And, they with things again like Magic School where they don't necessarily have to know how to design perfect prompts to get what they want from an AI. I think we'll see a lot more AI generated content, hopefully, though, with human user involvement in that, overseeing it. I think that we're also going to see more of a rise in the virtual reality when it comes to learning. It's out there. It still hasn't been widely adopted because it's so expensive. But I think when we start integrating AI into these systems, we will see companies emerging that are providing it for more real life student experiences. And I think it would be great when we talk about connection and online learning to be able to, right now with AI, you're in the AI, it's providing you with feedback, but I haven't seen a ton of how do you collaborate or have a contest with a peer in that AI unless there's a lot of chat rooms that you can go into to collaborate with peers, or hopefully you're in a live classroom as well. So you've got that hybrid model where you're getting some connection time with your peers and
Yeah.
connection time online. But I haven't yet seen, and maybe you have, I don't know, a ton of them for school boards that are offering you that where I could see Eric also in my science class and be, in those AI systems. And virtual reality is going to offer a lot about that. We saw some simulations early on where schools were setting up virtual campuses, right, where you could go visit things, but that
Right.
collaboration component could still be built upon. So I think that's something we're definitely going to, it'll be interesting. I'm keeping my eye on it to see because there's so
Yeah.
much you could do with it to
Was there a
prepare students
distinction
before
there
they get.
between virtual reality, like the headset thing, and just virtual world technology? So
That's
Web
true. That's
3,
true.
right? Because
That's
I,
true.
I
But they
would
refer
agree
to it
with
as,
you. Yeah, there's
yeah,
more Web 3 coming in virtual
yeah,
world stuff. I've got an avatar, right? And right, the
yeah.
avatar represents me and whatever, and I can go virtually into these meetings and interactions versus having to wear a headset and or even like the Apple Vision Pro thing, which is quite interesting, and the potential applications of that. Although, from my perspective, right, so we've been talking about VR for 20 years almost. Everybody thought
Hmm.
that every year it seems like you hear, oh, this is the year VR is going to go big. And we're 15, 20 years into it and it hasn't yet. So, but you seem to think it's finally really is there, which is interesting. I kind of hope you're
I
right.
think it's coming.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that AI has been a game changer in the way we develop, the way we program. And I think you're right. I think we're going to see more Web3 to begin with, more virtual worlds where you can, do really interesting things and
Mm,
collaborate and interact. But I think you're going to see a lot more, and maybe budgets will impact that as well. Virtual reality in things, you're going to be able to do things like, put the gloves and the mask on and perform an operation as a medical student
right.
studying, and I don't know. I think it's going to have a lot for skills training and experiences. Maybe not as common as the Web3, but we'll see. I don't know. I think it's coming.
Okay, I hope you're right. I'd be excited to see some of that. Yeah, I've had somebody on the show too who is an expert in creating virtual reality learning experiences, and I also did one on the virtual environment uh, at the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. They actually have a full facility that's a virtual, they call it a cave is the term for it, but it's a virtual environment. So the entire room transforms into a 3D space and you can change it into anything you want. And even without a headset, the students can kind of walk around in the environment and manipulate it. And and it's big enough. It's a full-sized room, so you can have 30 students all in there at the same time experiencing it. So anyway, some really cool stuff going on there. What they did was very innovative and multiple patents and stuff for their design of this large cave environment. So yeah, there's definitely potential breakthrough stuff that one, in fact, that was my biggest challenge to them was I said, so how do you scale this now? You've done it once. How do we make sure, right, there's one of these, on every campus, right, around the
Mm-hmm.
world now? And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so
But
they
it was
didn't
the
have a,
same with smart boards, right? When they first came out and a lot of these technological
yeah,
devices, there were times I would go to boards and I would think they're never going to get the budget to acquire all of these tools
yeah,
needed. And then there's schools you go into, there was a smart board in every classroom,
yeah,
adopting it. So
yeah,
I don't know. We'll see.
yeah,
It'll
yes.
be slow. It won't be fast, but I think it's coming.
I think it's getting faster. I like to believe
Hmm.
that it is getting faster. I think it has to. The world is changing so fast. You've seen a
Hmm.
lot. I'm even older than you. I've been in, technology for 30 plus years, and the pace of change in technology is just mind-boggling at this point, and it's just going to get faster. So education's
Hmm.
going to have to adapt and get faster at changing. So we'll see.
Hmm. Yeah, I think the other thing I'm hoping that we'll see, which is probably not as much as a hope and a wish, like the virtual reality, is more of a shift to micro learning for training with teachers instead of these, 3-hour sessions we used to go to, integrating it more into the day, making it more part of your day, that ongoing learning component. And that's really something I'm recommending to boards and education institutions when I visit them for consulting, that this is a great way. It's not intimidating. We all love, I have a YouTube video limit. If somebody
Yep.
sends me a video, Eric, and it's more than 20 minutes, it better be really good. If
Yeah.
it's 5 minutes, anyone can sign into that and learn something new. So I think we're going to see a huge shift to that as well.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree with that. We certainly see that in the corporate world now, a lot more, yeah, micro learning, bite size, on demand. I have this
Hmm.
problem. I need to know this thing, and I go take a right 5 minute, 15 minute online e-learning or virtual course that teaches me just what I need to solve the problem I'm facing today. Yeah,
Exactly. And I mean, that's why it's so ideal for training environments. The old school perspective was, all right, we can't touch this until we go and take the whole course, and we got to do the package, and I got to do that when it came to technology. And now we're learning that, don't be afraid. Micro learning is always relevant to the current problem you're trying to solve or task. And as you do enough of those sessions, as you
right.
use a platform or program more and more, then acquisition occurs. And you actually retain more of what you're learning because it is relevant and you are using it immediately versus taking
Yeah,
this whole whack course on how to use Microsoft and you're not using very much of it. And some of the things you learned you never use for 2 years later and you have to look them up again,
yep,
right? So it's a
exactly.
different way of
Yeah,
acquiring skills-based learning.
yep, yes. All right. Any last comments? Anything you wanted to talk about that we haven't talked about?
I don't know, we talked about a lot, Eric.
We did.
I've really enjoyed being here today. I was so grateful and happy to meet you.
No,
It was
me
kind of
too.
serendipitous. And it's so great as well to see another podcast airing that covers such interesting topics in the education space. There's quite a few different ones out there now, but I'm checking in and listening to them all the time, and not all of them are dealing with relevant current issues when it comes to technology and innovations. And maybe because I'm an innovator, not as exciting to me. So it was really great to find another podcast that's helping schools and educators move forward and know what's out there and learn from other people's best practices. So
Well, we are kindred spirit in that. I absolutely agree. And it's been a blast talking with you both before when we talked for your podcast and now for this one. So I thank you very much for both sessions. Actually, it's been really good conversation. And I do think we've, between us, we've had some very interesting experiences, and there are some great stories to share, and so many more. I've got all kinds of people. In fact, oddly, all of a sudden, I've had multiple people reaching out wanting to be on the show, which is great fun, and some really quality folks. So looking forward to the upcoming summer here as I work through a whole list of folks that we're going to have on the show. So, who've you got?
that's
Anybody great
amazing.
lined up? Who's coming up for you?
I have some actually really interesting episodes we're recording next week with some school directors. We've really gone for a diverse group between technology representatives that are developing fun software I played
Yep.
with, and checking in with leaders of school boards and university college institutions in different areas,
Mm,
just to compare and contrast. What are the challenges? What did they learn this past year? And what do they have facing them in this coming year to try to collaborate and learn together?
yeah. Awesome. Well, I will look forward to listening in on your episodes as well. I know there's a lot I can learn from your show. So, so thank you for the work you're doing.
Ditto. Ditto, me too. And maybe just to add to that, your audience, they can find me at globaledstation.com
Okay.
or AnnetteLevesque.com.
Yep. I've got both links in the show notes, so we'll be able
Perfect.
to find you. Great. All right. Well, thank you so much, Annette, and I'm sure we'll be in touch. We'll stay connected.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Eric.
So there you have it. Change is hard. And generally speaking, schools are not very good at it. So once again, I've had a guest on the show who has demonstrated bravery in the face of resistance to change. And she's blazed a new trail. So I want to just touch on a couple of points here that I think are really important. And this one that really, really resonates with me is the importance of the human connection, even in online or remote learning. Okay. So online does not diminish the need for human relationships and interactions. So there are opportunities here, to enhance learning through the use of AI and rapidly advancing technologies, but we can never forget that the importance of that teacher to student and peer to peer relationship and their interactions. It makes such a huge difference. Okay. Um, Hopefully you've been enjoying this. I think another great episode, great guest, great conversation about innovation and education. And so please subscribe and share. You just can't believe the lineup I've got of guests coming up. I'm Eric Byron. Thanks for listening to the Education Innovators podcast. And to all those education innovators out there, please keep doing what you're doing. You are making a difference.